I will now recognize who's the next Democrat witness? Ms. Lee from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Public education is important to me, right? I am a product of public education from pre-K through college, including programs like Head Start. When I listen to our colleagues on the other side, I'm always baffled by the conversation because I feel like sometimes it maybe intentionally misses the points. We've talked and we will continue to talk about good public schools or passing public schools versus failing public schools, instead of talking about failing public policy, failing funding schemes, failing bureaucracy. We know that we have a system of inequitably funded schools in this country where the quality of your education can largely be determined by your zip code or your family's wealth. In my home Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, our funding scheme was so inequitable that the court said we needed to go back to the drawing board. Republicans would love to believe that the solution is dismantling the Department of Education to give us local choice. But what they're actually giving us is the responsibility of subsidizing education to localities where people will pay higher property taxes to fund the discrimination of children. The burden of the federal government divesting from public education will be shouldered by first-time home buyers, for instance, in Pittsburgh, where homeownership is already becoming unsustainable, or by seniors in my home school district of Woodland Hills, those neighborhoods who are already strained and facing the loss of their Social Security benefits. These additional tax dollars will help charter and private schools hand-select students that will improve schools' outcomes while maximizing schools' bottom line. Our tax dollars won't help the children who will never be able to avail themselves of discriminatory school choices. Our public education system serves the child who is unhoused or transient, the child in the foster care system who doesn't have two well-connected parents to push for scholarships, or the family facing the digital divide, who will miss application deadlines reasonably, the child who didn't have access to Head Start or preschool like me, because we didn't invest in those. And that child is behind in reading. We need to invest in public education because it's the only option for children that so-called parents' rights movement has decided are not worth investing in. It's also no coincidence that the school choice movement is financed by billionaires like Jeffrey Yazd from my Commonwealth, who's trying to turn my state's education system into his own personal business. But a business's priority is to his stakeholders, and children have no stake in the economic model of school choice. Ms. Levin, I want to ask you about charter schools run by for-profit management companies, as you ended in the last question line. If a company is maximizing profit, it's not spending all public dollars on students, especially students who require more resources, which is why charter schools educate fewer students with disabilities than traditional public schools. In your opinion, Ms. Levin, are these for-profit charter management companies maximizing profit at the cost of students and families?
Yes.
Related to moving education into the private sector, one of the rationales for school choice is this free market idea that school choice will force public schools to compete for funding, thereby for public schools will improve because of that. Does evidence support this? What does the research show?
It does not, and neither does common sense. There's a lot of school choice right now in the public school system, so if competition is good, we're already creating and getting those benefits. But providing high-quality education shouldn't be accomplished through cutthroat competition. It should be accomplished by giving every school the resources that it needs.
Thank you. According to the 2022 GAO report, over 30% of Pennsylvania charters that receive federal charter schools program grant funding between 2006 and 2020 closed or never opened. I request unanimous consent for the 2022 GAO report on federally funded charter school closures to be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I've heard countless stories about charter schools closing because of fraud and mismanagement, and voucher programs taking advantage of the fact that they have no fiscal accountability. How concerned should we be about mismanagement, fraud, and corruption if we expand federal support and funding for charters and vouchers?
We should be very concerned. You're right that there are numerous reports throughout the country of both charter and voucher schools engaging in fraud, waste, and abuse of public dollars. It's unconscionable to send billions more in a federal voucher program to schools that have almost no accountability or transparency requirements.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. It's clear that school choice, this school choice fallacy we're talking about today, just exacerbates the inequalities, the inequities we already have. Wealthy white families will continue to have their choices subsidized by depriving largely Black and brown and other marginalized children of educational opportunities. If school choice is going to work, children and families do need real choices. A for-profit charter school that closes a month after opening because of fraud and mismanagement is not a real choice. A private school where tuition is twice as much as a child scholarship amount, where a child is not entitled to an IEP, and where a child can be expelled, for instance, for having 2 moms, is not a real choice. An underfunded neighborhood school with larger class sizes, fewer books, substandard wages for teachers, and deteriorating infrastructure because everyone's increasing tax dollars are being used to subsidize charters and private is also not a real choice. Families and children are owed fully funded, high-quality, well-resourced public schools, and we can accomplish that, but not by giving away more handouts to billionaires that will discriminate against the most marginalized students to turn a profit. I thank you all for your time, and I yield back.